Hi, I'm Ed Vigdor. I am the chairman of the Spirit of Harmony Foundation. I have worked with Todd for a number of decades on and off, working on different creative projects. And we are here to talk about the importance of music education for our kids and for our society and country as a whole.
Tell me how this all got started and when.
Well, it all got started. Gene and I met during an effort to raise some money for the fans in Japan following the earthquake in Tokyo. Real quick, it was just sort of an idea. Oh, let's throw some money together and send it to the folks that we know in Japan who could then send the money to wherever it was needed locally. And that's how Gene and I met. Fast forward a couple of years, Todd was doing one of his birthday Todd stocks down in the New Orleans area, and Gene and I started speaking about um, doing some kind of a give back to the community. It was about 5 years after Katrina, and so obviously we wanted to do something musically related. And Gene, being a long-standing professional in the nonprofit sector, I was working in film and television advertising at the time. She reached out, found and reached out to a little program in the lower Ninth Ward of New Orleans, and it was just a string, just basically violins, cellos, and double basses after school program for kids, really young ones, probably like maybe 10 years old to high school. She contacted this program and said, "Hey, we're going to be down. Todd Rundgren and a couple of hundred of his fans are going to be down there, and we'd like to pay you a visit and put together some sort of program to show our support for your music education program." And they were excited about it. And at the time, I was working with Todd editing his Wizard of True Star concert live video. So I reached out to him and it basically was like, "Well, does he have to do anything?" I said, "No, just give us your okay." He's like, "Oh, okay, fine, I'm good with that." So and he did get engaged, as because he didn't know what we were doing, but he did get engaged as we went. So as we went down there, we wound up raising $10,000
Nice.
to for the program, which was a surprise to them. And what was a surprise for Todd and all the fans, other than Gene and I, was that their music director did a string arrangement of Bang the Drum All Day. And again, this is violins, cellos, and double basses, no drums whatsoever, no percussion whatsoever. And it's funny. So we were documenting everything, and the kids start playing, and you just see Todd's face, and he has no idea what's going on while they're starting the song, and and then it gets to the chorus, and Todd and everybody in the room realizes what they're playing, and just everybody erupts in joy. And it was just so much fun and stuff like that. And Todd presented the big check that was a surprise for the executive director of the program down there. And it was just a really good time. And then later that day, or excuse me, that evening, uh, all of us, like 200 people, took over a restaurant in the lower Ninth Ward, and Todd made a comment about, oh, how this felt really good, and maybe we should formalize something and do something. And Gene and I looked at each other from across the table with, like, "Oh, okay, all right." And we put our heads together over the coming weeks and came up with well, first, even while we were doing that, I was meeting with Todd back in LA about a Wizard of True Star. So I said, "Todd, were you serious about that?" With that comment about trying to formalize some sort of charitable thing supporting music education, and we didn't know what it was going to be. And he had his hesitation, a little bit. He had never been involved with anything like that, with his name on it. He wasn't sure what he would be comfortable with it doing. And but he said, he was open to, hearing ideas. So something along those lines. So several months later, Gene and I are working on this proposal. Several months later, Todd's back in LA. Gene flies in from Chicago. And much to my surprise, that Gene was completely confident about, was we made a pitch to Todd, and we signed letters of incorporation right there to take the first step of formalizing the formation of the Spirit of Harmony Foundation. And it took a while, actually years, for Todd to really kind of figure out what he would like to have done and what he would like this to be. He did not want us to be just constantly fundraising and writing checks to other organizations. So, that was gone, and through Gene's leadership and experience in the nonprofit world, we kind of formed into a national advocacy foundation that, and this was Todd's idea, to try to pull resources together from either corporations or individuals or other nonprofits, whatever, to help support and build a network to help support each other and grow and make things better. And actually, when Todd made the official announcement at the NAM convention, he dubbed us like the eHarmony of music education advocacy, and that's kind of has stuck. Um, and we kind of do that, and it's formed into, Gene and I's focusing on trying to get people, primarily Todd's fans, to focus on what they can do locally in their community. We tried early on to, coming from a, national point of view, to contact, some school somewhere in, whatever state, that wasn't ours, and it just didn't go over very well. We realized people coming in from out of state, just, you got to have people there on the ground in their communities advocating for their kids. And I'll leave this up to Gene to kind of explain this next part. What were we basing our advocacy upon? And she discovered some wonderful studies that were going on in her backyard at Northwestern University, outside of Chicago.
Let me first address Northwestern University. And the reason why that work was so important is that we all know music is beautiful. We all know that it's fun. We all know everybody loves it. That's a given. But what we don't often know is that music education changes a child's brain. So the research that we discovered was actually proving, through thousands and thousands of hours of research and many, many, many students, that the gold standard of about 2 hours a week for 2 years of instrument-based music education will actually change a child's brain so that they will permanently be able to do certain things better than someone who doesn't have that training. And that includes things like working together. You have to have some predictive rhythms when you're playing with other players, the kind of motor memories that happen from instrument-based music education. So there are some very specific things that change for a lifetime. So 2 years of good, solid music education will level the playing field. So a child who has a lot of disadvantages in life will make up for many of those brain disadvantages that maybe were about nutrition or not a large vocabulary spoken in their home or anything like that. So they actually have the ability to level the playing field, where a child has a much greater chance to succeed as an adult if they have 2 years of music education, which isn't asking much. And what we believe is that we know how good music is for a child, so we believe it's a moral imperative. Just like any other education or the basic necessities of life, we know it's so good. How can you deny one child music and not another child because of their zip code or because of their economic situation. So that research really became kind of our guiding light. And we know that music education affects the brain, the neurological development. We know that it affects a child's economic potential in life because they'll stay in school, they'll stay out of trouble, they have really good things to do in the out of school hours. It helps them to be socialized, helps them to work together, helps them to take criticism. And that's a tough one. It helps them to learn patience. So many students, when they start learning music, they see a world in which they see all these music videos where everybody knows how to play. And then they start with an instrument and they're not very good. And it's very easy for them to feel discouraged. So a nurturing music education environment will teach them that if you work hard, you will get better. If you practice, you will get better. You will be able to play some of these things. So that research is kind of the structure behind what our advocacy is about, because we say that these elements are so important for a child that we want to tell the world about it. It's not just that music is nice. We want to say that music is essential. And on that note, when we started the foundation, music education was struggling in schools and budget cuts were taking it away more and more from schools because many schools would prefer to put their resources into the athletic programs or put their resources into other programs. Music programs don't have to be expensive, but an orchestral music program with a lot of hands-on education can be costly.
But excuse me, I'm sorry to interrupt you. Are any of these institutions being made aware of this research and recognizing what it can do and the importance? So does that affect anybody's decision making and carrying it or not carrying it?
That's a good question. It does affect, once somebody really gets that, it affects them, but there are so many forces at play with budget discussions. And that's, as Ed said, it's so important for us to make this advocacy and this information known in our world, among Todd's fans, among music fans, so that they can go to their local school council meeting, or they can go to their school. I often tell people when they want to get involved locally is the first thing they should do is call the elementary school down the street from them, the closest one, and ask to speak with their music director. And if they say, here's your music director, then you talk to the music director and you say, well, gee, what do you need? I would love to help in any way. If they say they don't have a music director, then you say, oh, well, gee, why? And if I could provide you with some information of why this is so important for your children, why the parents should be demanding access to music education for their children. And as I said before, it doesn't have to be expensive. We sometimes encourage a low-income community to try something that's as simple as a drum line, or get the little itty bitties just banging on their desks and learn rhythms and learn how to have rhythm together. Anything is better than nothing. And we take a school where it is and we kind of provide them with one-on-one counseling to help with what they have, because every school is different. Some music teachers call us up and they say, well, I just got hired to be a music director of this school, and I walked into the music room and there are 3 broken violins on the shelf. And so what do? Well, you need instruments. That's the first thing. And then we help them with maybe having a community instrument drive so that people can look in their closets and see what they have to donate. Or Sometimes we advise them we have a slideshow that they could bring to their school council. They could do the PowerPoints. They could do whatever they need to do. They could have a bake sale. They could sell tickets to something, have a raffle, all the different ways that they could raise the funds that they need to have a viable music program. So that's where our army of supporters come in, because I'm in Chicago, Ed's in Colorado, Todd's in Hawaii. I'm not going to be able to call a program in New York City and say, hey, I'm this person in Chicago and I want to butt my nose into your business and I want to tell you why you need a music program. No, it's much better to have someone who says, I live down the block and I really want the kids in this school to have music, because it'll change their lives and it'll change the spirit of the school. There is just nothing better than, we hear stories about the school bands that want to lift their presence in the school. So they do little impromptu concerts in the hallway, or the choir does a little singing for special events. So it brings music, it brings life, it brings goodness, it brings purpose. Those are the things that are intangible. They're worth every penny that's spent and much, much more.
Tell us about a couple of the success stories that you both take pride in.
Well, I mean, we don't personally take credit for a lot of things, but I think because as Gene was talking, there was a program that was one of the first that we were introduced to in Los Angeles called Harmony Project. And the woman who started it was inspired by watching gang members stop in their tracks while this little girl was playing violin at some, I don't know if it was an outdoor mall or whatever it was. They went into the most gang-riddled areas of Los Angeles and started a music program. And this was full orchestral music. I mean, that's what they were focused on, which sort of seemed a little weird to me, because you figure you're going into an urban area and stuff, and it would be, they'd probably be more into hip hop or whatever. But anyway, the kids embraced it, and that's great. And what they found was, with these kids, not only about the poverty wreaking havoc on their minds, and what this study at Northwestern revealed, why they basically weren't hearing, their brains weren't processing sound. Not that there was anything wrong with them, they just think about it as a mixing console with no wires going into it. The mixing console is useless. But once, with the 2 years of music, as Gene described, the brain gets hardwired, and the brain processes sound better. So what they did was, these kids who hated the word vacation, because in their area, they're living in these gang-riddled areas that are dangerous. They can't go outside. They're stuck in their apartments, which are, no, Disneyland either. But then they had this other place to go, and they had this music to go to, and and again, some of the things that Gene pointed to, they worked together. They had to learn to listen to each other. They started feeling good about themselves, because if you've picked up, anybody who's ever picked up an instrument to start playing, they know the frustration of it, or anything new, whatever new somebody is doing. There's always that beginning learning curve that's really, really frustrating. But once they get past that, they start realizing that, wow, I can do that. I just accomplished that. I feel good about me. And that helps them to feel good about themselves in their academic studies and stuff like that, if they start doing better in school, because they can hear better and they can process the sound of what the teacher is saying. And one of our board members, I think his life personified it. Kevin Elman, former drummer of Utopia, he grew up in a very affluent family in New York City. But he was a troublemaker. He was in trouble all the time. I mean, really, really bad, like heading down the road of like prison world. And his parents, luckily they had the resources to send him away to a school with locks on the doors, as he described it. And when he met with the doctors there, and the I don't know if they were psychologists or what they were, but basically the doctor who ran the place basically prescribed him drums, because the only thing that he was being successful in his life was playing drums. He had teachers and he listened to teachers and he practiced and he succeeded and he excelled. So Kevin went on to become a professional drummer. But when he left drumming, those life skills, as he called them, um, he used those life skills to translate into his new a career path, which happened to be finances. Um, you find a teacher, you do the work, you study hard, you practice, you continue to learn and move on. And all of those skills that you learn as playing and being a musician or playing in a school band or whatever, you can apply to everything in your life and anything in your life, professionally or personally. I mean, we have personal relationships. You got to work with your wife or your husband. You got to listen to them, or it's not going to be very good.
And I imagine everybody learns, like one of you was, I think Gene was mentioning MTV and whatnot, or that all you see in the media is the iceberg above the water. And it teaches these kids that the work happens beneath the surface.
Right.
That's an excellent way of putting it. I never thought about it that way, but yeah, that's a good way of putting it. And then, I'm a sports fan, and I love sports. But when I was a kid, I couldn't play sports. And I had an older brother who would remind me of that at every chance he had. But I played music. So the skills that you get, a lot of the skills you get when you're playing on a sports team, playing together, working as a team, all of that stuff, listening to your coaches and learning. For the kid who can't throw a ball, they can get those life skills in music. So by denying that kid who can't throw a ball the ability and the availability to learn those skills is doing grave harm to a large portion of our society. And I like to joke around. It's like music education. You get all the great benefits of playing in the sports and no risk of head injury. So,
well, the guy, unless you're who was it, Chris Novoselic throwing the bass up in the air on Saturday Night Live, and plunked him on the head.
Yeah, so. or you get hit by the two. You get you're the guy who dots the I at Ohio State University, and you hit yourself with the sousaphone or something like that. However, those aside, and it's just and then just going back to this Harmony project, in LA, I just remember visiting them one day, and I was talking to this young lady. She was probably in like 11th grade, and she had been with the program and playing music for a while, and she had no concept of like actually going off to college when she started. I mean, she was worried about living long enough to get through high school. That's how bad the situation was. She was going to, somehow she got it in her mind that she wanted to go study medical technology engineering. I didn't even know that was a thing. And here is this young lady, in Los Angeles, who's actually got some scholarship to go to Tulane University to study medical technology engineering. And that's what she wanted to pursue professionally, all because she had an opportunity to play music and work with others and acquire all of those skills and the confidence and to open up her world to other possibilities. That her world was very, very narrow. It was just like ghetto. Then through music and all the people she was exposed to, her whole world of possibilities opened up. And when you talk about, Gene mentioned about the economics, that's the kind of thing that breaks those cycles of poverty. This young lady, who now is a young lady at this point, it will not be living in poverty. She went off to school. She will get a degree. She will get a job doing something and not be living in squalor as her parents suffered through for whatever reasons. And she is breaking that cycle of poverty.
That's the part that needs to get broken through. So, Gene, how has the advocacy that the foundation has been doing all these years changed over the years, and where are you at now?
Oh, thanks for asking that. So when we first began, as Ed recounted the story of New Orleans, we were molded more or less on the traditional foundation, where we did fundraisers, we gave out money. And because our founder and president is a person who is brilliant and has a different way of looking at the world, he very quickly realized that everybody else is doing that and that we are going to be different. And he realized that it is not really sustainable to be in the place of giving out grants, and then the same organization comes back and asks the next year. And then if you have a bad year, they struggle and could possibly close their doors because of you. So he wanted to avoid all that and wanted something that's much more sustainable. So after we were around for several years, we took a much stronger stand toward the advocacy rather than any kind of, well, we've never done direct service. We've never operated our own music program, but we took a stand where we went away from that writing checks and constantly fundraising to basically fundraising for our operating expenses, but spending our time educating our various publics. You know, that's everything from the larger public to our very specific inner circle. And we do everything from, as I mentioned, one-on-one kind of counseling, consulting with individual music programs, to helping match music programs with the resources they need, to helping music programs operate instrument drives where they can go to their own communities and try to get instruments, or planning an event. We do a lot of that help. They want to have a fundraiser, and you know, we've been around the block. We know a few of the pitfalls, so we can help them with some of that logistic work. But we also, when Todd is doing a concert tour, we have information tables at his venues, and that is all operated by volunteers, and volunteers that actually are buying their own ticket to the show. That's one of the requirements. They have a ticket, they show up, they talk about why music is important to them, why music education is important to them. They give out our little gifties. We always have little swag, you know, bracelets and stuff. But the main thing we give out, we tempt them with the bracelets, but we give out information cards. And on the back of the information card, it has bullet points on what you can do in your own community to support music education.
And what are some of those things?
Well, we've mentioned a few of those things, but some of them are, you know, attend the music program at the school that's close to you. You know, just show up, applaud, sit in the seat, fill the seat, and let the kids know that what they're doing is really wonderful, and that we're supportive. Or, you know, if there's a parade, yell and scream when the band comes by and really encourage them. Talk up music education and why music is important to you in your own world, around the water cooler or at your office or whatever. Say, you know, this is something that I'm passionate about. Certainly, many people do take the route of finding out about their local school council, showing up, being elected to it, and then carrying that advocacy to the local school council, which is tremendously important. Or even sharing on their social media. We always supply tons of content about the importance of music education. So our people, you know, are on our Facebook group or whatever, and they can then share it, and it drives that message home. Because if each of our people are committed supporters of music education advocacy, if each of them go out in their world and encourage their own kids or grandkids or great grandkids to study music and to support that. I can't tell you how many times I talk to somebody who is bragging about their grandkids. I say, oh, so are they studying music? And then they go, oh, you know, I think I should try to encourage them to do it.
I was just about to say that one of the things that you know that I've done several times, you know, without really much effort. You know, you happen across a couple with a young kid, and you start talking to them about, you know, are they going are you going to encourage them to play music? And you know, some of them are like, oh yeah, I play music, so I'm going to have my kid play. It was like, great. And they still don't know about the effects, the positive effects that it'll have. But then you come across people who know it's not kind of in their wheelhouse or anything like that, and you start talking to them and explaining what it does for their kids, not only for their brain but for their self-esteem, for, you know, learning abilities, developing those life skills that we've talked about. And they never put that together, and they're like, "Oh, really?" And it's just like, and you know, when I've told them, and it's like, you don't have to have them play a violin. You know, it could be any instrument. It doesn't matter what the instrument is. You know, when I was growing up, I grew up in a musical family. You know, I took private piano lessons when I was a kid, and when I started getting, you know, that was elementary school. When I started getting to junior high, my father wanted me to play trombone because he played trombone. You know, luckily for me, my arm was too short and I couldn't play the trombone. So then they started going, they wanted me to play the violin. I'm like, I'm not playing the violin. I want to play the drums. And fortunately, my elementary school music teacher, who was also my private piano teacher, actually advocated for me to my parents to get me drum lessons because she knew that I was really, really into it. And I did. And I played drums for, you know, many, many, many years. If I was a more disciplined person, I might have pursued a career as a professional drummer, but I wasn't. But that's a whole nother story. But those are the kinds of things that you can do in your community. Just these off the cuff conversations that you have with somebody who you don't know. You just happen to be, oh, there's this couple at Costco, and you just start this conversation with them for no other reason, and they have kids, and you talk to them about it. You know, that's a great way to spread the word. And it's
Well, it
organic.
really is. And one of the things that is so important, I think, about the spirit of harmony is because we're so different from other organizations,
Hmm.
and because we're not encumbered by those responsibilities, like having to
Pay staff.
open the doors every day and hire teachers and all
Right.
this, we're able to really navigate through the nonprofit world in a way that others don't have that opportunity to do. We can cross through the siloing that happens in nonprofits. I've been a nonprofit person my entire life, and there's a siloing. You don't want to share information about funding sources because you don't want to potentially lose your funding. You really don't want to uh, share some of your tips or secrets because you have competition. Everybody's in competition. It's not always one big happy family when funding is cut. And especially right now, at this particular time in
Right.
2025, funding is just in a terrible situation and programs are really struggling. So to cut through any kind of competition, we're not vying for the same dollars they are. So I can ask somebody, if you want to send your grant proposal to me, I'll take a look at it and give you feedback, which I do. And sometimes they don't want to hear that. So
Yeah, but it's coming from a professional. Who knows?
Yeah.
Well, and I got to tell you, what Gene, when I, you know, like I said, you know, when Gene was jumped off of Zoom for a moment, and Scott, I told you, I came from a film and video post production background and was working in, you know, theatrical marketing. You know, when this all started, and then got, you know, Gene introduced me to the nonprofit world. One of the biggest shocks, one of the two biggest shocks I had was the competitive nature of the nonprofit world. I thought, oh, we were all like, you know, kind of like we all want to get our kids musically educated, and like, so let's all get together and do this. And it's like, yeah, it doesn't work that way. You know, it's not. And then the other thing I think blew both of us away was when we first went to NAMM, and we realized that music instrument manufacturers are not eager to actually help put instruments in kids' hands.
They don't give a shit.
Now I get they have to make money. I totally respect that. I get it. But
But what better way to make money than to build your next army of customers?
That's exactly right. And I always think about like Yamaha, especially their brand is on everything from cars to tractors and lawnmowers and all of that. Well, you put a Yamaha guitar into a little kid's hands and they create this bond with Yamaha so that when they're older, even if they're not playing, they're gonna go, they need a lawnmower and they see Yamaha in Home Depot. They're going to buy Yamaha, perhaps, and at least you have that advantage over, whatever else. But they don't, and it's like, okay, fine. So, but that was the kind of surprises that I had, in being new to this whole thing. And
Does the same
I
thing
think
go
it's,
with the retailers? Like Guitar Center doesn't get involved in trying to
Well, they
help?
do, and we don't want to sound like they don't,
yeah,
because
right. It's
NAMM,
limited, right?
a large
It's
part
the
of their
level, right?
dues to be part of NAMM is NAMM does fantastic work with advocacy. And, I think part of the situation is if you're in the business of selling guitars, you might want to do some relationships with particular programs that, uh, you know, that supply guitar lessons, and they are requesting guitars for kids. But you can't just, have a truck full of guitars with the recipients not having skin in the game. So you really want to have a relationship, and it's not just being the fairy godmother and throwing guitars out. You what we try to do, and what some of our closest organizations try to do, is really develop a relationship so that when the Spirit of Harmony joins forces with Guitars and Ooks in the Classroom or Guitar Center Foundation or something like that, then this is a more serious thing. We've actually thought it through. We actually have recipients who really want it. They're ready for it. It's going to go to good use, and we're going to handle it properly. Because we've also had, you think if you just put an instrument in every kid's hand, it's going to be great. No, 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 no,
Yeah,
no. That doesn't work, because half of the instruments might wind up being sold on the street, and the other half of them will be in somebody's closet. You
right.
really want to make sure that you have a relationship and kind of a depth to this kind of work. And we try to, I think that's kind of based on the way Todd thinks of things very deeply. It's looking at it from a deeper relationship building, meaningful place.
Yeah.
And so everything that we do is just trying to be uh, very systemic and efficient, so that we have all kinds of a huge database of of people who collect instruments, people who give instruments, and we try to be very careful and strategic whenever we help. And that way our organization has a certain gravitas that I'm really proud of. And you mentioned, Scott, success stories. I think the fact that our organization is two people who operate this thing from their homes, and we have this wonderful network, and we care so very much that we approach everything with a very thoughtful way, a very caring and compassionate way to make the most out of every resource. So I think that is a real sense of pride for us, that we have people who really love the Spirit of Harmony. We have people who've put the Spirit of Harmony in their estate plans because they believe in what we're doing. They really believe that we're sustainable. We're not about to close our doors like a lot of music programs are always threatening, or in reality or in threatening. It's
Right.
like, oh, this
It-
is it. We need $100,000 right now. But we
and
don't do that.
here's another, more recent, example of success. LA fires wiped out instruments for professionals as well as for schools and all of that. So we got approached from, well, we were already working with, Todd was going out on tour doing the Burt Bacharach, What the World Needs Now tour. And we had worked with their producers, the producers of the tour, doing some charitable stuff when they also did the David Bowie tribute a few years earlier. So we were already, kind of talking to them. Okay, what can we do? And we were thinking about it. And then the LA fires happened. So we turned our attention to that, and we were approached, or we got connected. I forgot exactly how it happened, but with a program that G just mentioned, Guitars and Ooks in the Classroom. And Gene and I already, we had already thought about the Guitar Center Foundation, and we know the executive director from years ago. And so we were talking, and then these pieces just came together, just very, very organically. Guitars and Ooks in the Classroom were the people on the ground who had a long-standing relationship with the local schools, and can interface with them about, okay, what needs to be done, to try to help reestablish the programs that they had. Guitar Center Foundation, their immediate response, understandably, was trying to help out professionals. People who just got, like Bob Clearwater. Basically his house and his studio burned down. I don't know that Bob went to the Guitar Center Foundation, but he's just one of the names I know. But so, and that's the Guitar Center. I mean, that's their bread and butter as professional musicians. So they went to help, but then they also stepped up to the plate to try to help with the school programs as well. So the three of us, we kind of came in with, okay, the tour was about to kick off, and let's advocate and try to raise some awareness and funding for the need to get the music programs going again. Guitars and Ooks and Guitar Center Foundation, they approached Martin Guitars, who donated two gorgeous acoustic guitars and cases. And I brought them out to LA, and the whole band signed them. And we had the guitars auctioned off at the first couple of shows in Southern California. And Gene and I, well, the foundation funded information cards and banners that went out on the tour across the country, and we wound up raising, I don't know, $5,000, I think. And it's doesn't seem like a giant amount, but it helps with other efforts that are going on as well. And we raise that awareness. So, that's a positive thing. And that's, kind of, one thing that Gene and I are proud of, like that we get to do. And again, it goes back to that eHarmony thing that I mentioned very early on, that Todd, I don't know where it came out of his head. But that was like literally back when we were just a couple of months old, and he was just on stage, just talking as he's known to do, and he just spurted out this, oh yeah, we're like the eHarmony of music education. And so there you go.
Is the status of the educators. And what I mean is, I'm thinking about quantity, right? Because the schools are contracting programs. So now these educators need to have a place to go. Some of them try to go into private practice and teaching, I imagine, but some of them leave educating music. So what's the state of that? And what do we do advocacy wise about creating the next generation of teachers so that the whole, you got to have the students, but you also got to have the teachers.
We try to, I mean, certainly within our network of organizations, we have a good relationship with various academic institutions that train music educators. Here in Chicago, there's Vandercook College of Music, which is education for educators. And we will support them in so many ways so that they can, well, let me give an example. Whenever I get in Chicago, people want to donate like sheet music or books, different music books. I usually will call Vandercook because they have a library that they open so that their training teachers could take whatever they want as a resource. So, they get the Halloween music book or something like that. And Vandercook might not have the budget to pay for that, but we support making sure that we give any resources to their library that they can give out to the music students they train. And that happens in more places. I was not aware that there were institutions that absolutely specialized in music education training. I always thought that most schools that have a music program are training people to be the best master musicians they could be. But I learned that that is not the case, that music education is this huge field. And the schools really are getting lots of graduates. There are a lot of people that are engaging in this. And kind of to answer your question, it's on their resume. So, I've known some of the graduates from these master's programs in music education or bachelor's programs that, for example, get a job, and the schools really work on placing them, but they might get a job at like a Boys and Girls Club that might not actually have a music program, but they can begin a music program at that club because they have this range of training that makes them able to lead a music program like that. So it isn't only in schools, because a school that has a music program right now, they may or may not continue it. Some have a really strong music program and then they hire teachers and everything is fine. But where funding has been lost, like National Endowment of the Arts or Humanities or something like that, where those kinds of programs have been lost, the nature of music is that they might be able to do other things in that same organization and bring the music in, even if it's not necessarily funded. And they're still music teachers in a way, waiting until a program could be more firmly established again. I don't want to paint a terribly bleak picture, but it is difficult right now.
It's a challenge.
Really,
it's definitely
really
the whole thing. The whole concept, everything we're talking about is a challenge, and that's why it's so important.
It's terrible.
I think there's also, just like, where are the teachers coming from? I think there's a natural pipeline of teachers, at least on a certain level. I'm not, not maybe, like, a person who's like formally educated to be a music educator, but I think there's a constant natural pipeline of music teachers who are actually working musicians or want to be working musicians, who work as much as they can as musicians, but they have to make a living, so they teach. I know several people here in Colorado who are, working musicians, and they want to, they're pursuing their art on stage and whatever. But they also have to they have to put a roof over their heads, so they teach. I know I met a young lady years ago who went to University of Denver and got a master's in some music, and she, not only is she pursuing her stage career, she was also teaching in the School of Rock. So there's that. But here's an interesting thing, I think, that Gene and I have run into, and we've talked about numerous times, where the music world is sort of fallen short on, are people who are formally trained to actually repair instruments.
Mhm.
That is a vocation that is in great need, where somebody who, loves playing music, who maybe, okay, not all of us who play music are going to get up on stage and make a living at it. Probably a very small percentage actually ever will. But you can be involved in your passion, and also, if you have those abilities, that sort of mindset of uh, um, working with your hands to repair things, um, there is a career for you to look to repair instruments, from guitars and horns and whatever, where you can make a very good living. Well, you know what? You're going out and you're gigging and having a good time and raising your family and having fun and all of that stuff. But there's very little that we're aware of. I mean, there's actually a whole institution, or I don't know, not a foundation. Gene, you could probably correct me. I'm sure you can. Where, of like a professional alliance of instrument repair people,
Mhm.
that and it's a career, it's one of those career paths that a person who loves playing music, that wants to be in the music world in some regard, can pursue and make a living at, without being, thinking they're going to be Paul McCartney, and stuff like that. And even in, working at a, even if you wanted to work at a record company or whatever that even looks like anymore. Um, but you could still be working in the music industry and making a really, really, really good living and really helping out. And we know that there are, you know, that's the thing with the instrument drives that we have to drill into people's heads. You're going to get all these instruments; they're going to need love, and sometimes that's not going to be cheap. Um, and I know of a couple of places that Gene and I have learned of, that they do the best they can to help out, in donating or making their services cheaper. But they still got to pay their staff, and they still need to
Right.
buy parts and strings and da 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 da. And that's a real world practical thing that somebody who is a musician can pursue and have a career at, while they're playing guitar at nights on weekends.
And that goes along exactly with what I was asking about the teachers, that here's another piece in the pipeline that, again, without all of it, the whole thing collapses. So we need
Right.
all
Right.
these things to keep filling up. Okay, so let me let you go. Lastly, tell us where people can find you, what people can do to get involved, how you want, what the involvement you want, and then lastly, what do we say? What do we tell parents of young children?
Well, you can send us $1 billion. No, Gene, I'll let you take that.
Okay. I just want to add one more point about the education of repair.
Please.
It's one of our dreams, and we try every opportunity we get to encourage schools. A lot of them have like training programs to teach kids how to fix bicycles. But if we could get in some schools like a vocational program on teaching kids how to fix instruments, it's as Ed said, it's a really good profession, because music stores need to hire people who know how to fix. They could fix their own. A lot of the repair people are mom and pop shops, and they're getting older, and there are fewer and fewer people who know how to fix some of these instruments. So that is kind of we motivate that as frequently as we possibly can, as a thing that schools can do to bring in somebody who knows how to fix instruments, who could train the kids on that technical point. So said that.
One last thing on that. Another
Yes, sir.
story. We knew a guy who was an elementary school art teacher on Long Island, and he had to, basically all the teachers, it was the end of the school year, and the principal brought them all in and said, well, we got a couple more weeks, you got to figure out how to like keep the kids occupied. So he came up with the idea, well, he's going to do like a little bit of a friendly competition for his elementary school art kids. Design a guitar body, paint and design a guitar body. And he went out and he bought all these broken guitars or whatever, and the kids went in and they had a blast, and they painted the guitar bodies. And then the following year, because the kids enjoyed it so much, he basically turned his art class into a luthier class, where these kids he would go out and buy broken up guitars, acoustic guitars or whatever, out of his own pocket, really inexpensive. And the kids would come in and they would fix the guitars. And the kids were loving it so much that they would like blow off recess to go and work on the guitar that they're working on. Kind of unrelated, we got reached out from some guy who was in Afghanistan, at the height of all of that, craziness. That was a musician in Afghanistan wanting to teach girls how to play guitar, and he was doing it. But they needed guitars, so we hooked up those people in Afghanistan with this music teacher in Long Island, who, by the way, we helped get strings and stuff like that from the Daddario Foundation, which is, Daddario is actually on Long Island, the company. And they shipped out like a dozen guitars with notes from the elementary school kids in Long Island to the young ladies in Afghanistan, these guitars. And then the girls in Afghanistan wrote the kids back, about how thankful they were, about, oh, we really appreciated it. And they put together videos. I mean, these guys recorded, he wanted to do one with Todd, but he did one with Brian Wilson, where these girls in Afghanistan are singing and playing acoustic guitar. and they've got Brian Wilson singing with them, not physically with them, but how it goes. So now, did any of those little elementary school kids grow up with a passion to either play music and or fix instruments? I don't know, but you might have planted some seeds there.
Absolutely. So,
Yeah.
okay,
So
Gene,
Gene, go back to where you can
Gene,
find
yeah,
us.
go back to
Okay.
tell everybody how we can help and where to find you guys and what you want from us. And again, the thing with the parents, what do we tell parents?
Fantastic. Okay. On our website, which is spiritofharmony.org, so spiritofharmony.org, we have an advocacy toolkit, which gives all of the chapter and verse of what we've been discussing. And we use that toolkit to make the case for music education, give all kinds of resources, and it's very up to date. Everything from how to clean instruments so that they're safe for kids, how to run a music program so it's safe, how to get funding, how to assess what kind of program you might want. Do you want the drum line or the ukulele group, or do you want an orchestral or a band or marching band? So the advocacy toolkit in our website also opens you up to a world of other resources. So that is a very rich place to go to kind of get lost in the whole topic of music education advocacy. We're also very present on Facebook primarily. That's kind of where we live, where our community lives. And so that's big fun. And we have a fan page, Spirit of Harmony Foundation, and we have a group which is much more active, and that's Todd Rundgren's Spirit of Harmony. So definitely connect with us on Facebook. But we also send out a newsletter very, very rarely, like 3 times a year, because everybody gets too many. And we have auctions every year, twice, which they're wonderful. We're having one right now that has 300 items, everything from vinyl to t-shirts to posters, you name it. And it's a really great way to have people clean out their closets with things they don't need anymore, and it's someone else's treasure. And it helps us, and it helps give us our operating funds. So that is something very important. And we always talk about that on our social media. But to answer the question about parents, the very most important thing for parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, neighbors, is to always ask the question to a child whether they have music in their school, how they feel about it, try to urge them, nudge them to jump in with both feet. My school, I grew up with no music education. That's part of my passion. My brain isn't as good as all your brains because I did not have that musical training. And I want to be sure that every child has an opportunity that I didn't have. When I was in high school, I joined the chorus immediately because I loved music. And I saved up my waitress money so I could take piano lessons because I always wanted to play piano. And it's so important to light that fire. So it's always a matter of parents asking children, supporting, if they're playing, not to make them feel self-conscious when they're crummy. That's so often you see these comedy routines about, oh no, my kid took up trumpet. No, don't do that. They feel bad enough when they hit a bad note. So
Oh,
to
my
be
mother wasn't too happy about me like when I first started playing drums
yeah,
either.
there you go. But it's to be supportive because it is so important. The kids aren't going to be interested in music because they want their brain to be better. But if the adults who care about that child nurture any spark of interest in singing or electronic music, That's important too. I mean, it maybe isn't instrumental traditional music, but we support that. Sure, if they could do mixing on their iPhone, that's great. Anything is better than nothing. And
Right.
that's so important, and to nurture that and never criticize it ever, 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 ever. Uh, it's the most important thing that I wouldn't just say parents, adults. I'm not a parent myself, so it's about the children in my neighborhood. It's about my neighbors. It's about the kids in the school down the street, and it's about the kids I encounter all the time.
And it's also about our world. I mean, music is the universal language. Whether the most primitive, just banging out, rhythm or whatever. I mean, our hearts are a rhythm. Our stepping is a rhythm. Everything is based in rhythm in the whole planet. Everything. It is the most fundamental thing on the most basic, atomic level without it being actual, physical like an atom. But it's everywhere in everything. And it is the one thing that crosses every bridge, whether it be cultural or racial or ethnic or religious or whatever, is music. And
Right.
and and
And people who, and people who don't speak English know the words to
Yes.
English songs and know what it
right.
means, even though they know nothing else about the language.
Or they can hum the tune.
Yeah, I
We
was
can all get
fortunate
together and
enough.
hum a tune. I mean, I can't, I can't if there was a song in Jap that I knew the tune, from Japan. I couldn't sing the lyrics like your point, but I can hum the tune with my Japanese friends. You know.
No, I was fortunate enough about 20 years ago to see Muse in France, and it blew our mind that everybody knew every word, and it's so much more
Yeah.
than just the music. The whole message and everything just connects everybody.
And
So
Yes.
it brings everybody together, and that is, not to go deep into the weeds on this one, but I mean, that is what is just so ugly and missing in our cultural right now, is that togetherness, and that, being able to join. Hey, I'm guilty of it as well, but it's that's what music does. It brings everybody together, whether it's a bunch of kids in an elementary school, banging some sticks together for the first time, or marching to a rhythm, to a symphony orchestra, to, an international whatever, that coming together to try to find solutions and stuff like that. And
and
we've lost that.
there aren't that many things like that in life. So
Yeah, I
thank
don't
you
know
Right.
that
guys.
there's anything else like other than drinking a glass of water and for
Exactly.
survival.
Music
So
can
Yep.
change the world.
yeah.
Yep.
So anyway,
Absolutely.
so
Thank
thanks,
you
Scott.
guys
This was
so much.
great.
So at the end of every show, we go over one of the old Rock Love magazine issues from the late 90s. And in this issue, this was one of our first color issues. It was a roundup of the summer, I was going to say film festivals. It was a roundup of the summer music festivals, the Warped Tour, Horde, Lollapalooza, and we saw great bands like Sponge that summer. I was really into Sublime at the time, and really tragic what happened to Bradley Nowell. The Cure in San Jose, and Robert Smith's, that was the tour. He was coming out in everybody's hockey jerseys. That was so much fun. Inside the issues, there are articles like the coverage of that tour of the Cures in San Jose in 1996. What a great, great, great fun time that was. You know, some of these festivals, amazing bands. Dick Dale at the Warped Tour. I mean, how cool was that to see him alongside some of the great punk legends? Um, I interviewed Dick Dale at about this time, and it was an incredible conversation hearing about the history of surf guitar and the whole scene that came out of that late 50s era. It was just magnificent stuff. One of the things we also loved to cover in Rock Love Magazine were new band formation, and especially that was an interesting era of superstar groups getting together and sometimes just doing one-off albums and whatnot. John Taylor's group was called Neurotic Outsiders, and The second I heard that John Taylor from Duran Duran was doing this with this band, I was really intrigued. Another band that got me early on, and they kind of faded away. It's too bad. This guy, Happy Chichester, from somewhere in Ohio, as I recall, and this band, Howlin' Maggie. And if you go back and you want to listen to one of the great, fun summer tunes, although it's kind of a depressing song if you really dig into the lyrics, of Alcohol by Howlin' Maggie in that 1996 era. That was a great record, and Happy Chichester put on a great show. The Horde Fest that year had Blues Traveler on it, whom I loved. Another great festival that went by the wayside. The Horde Festival was out every year. And there were bands playing all over town that summer in the Bay Area, from the Melvins to Sponge, as we talked about, Metallica at one of the festivals, Seattle favorite Satchel, who we became friends with a couple of the guys in the band, and I think Sean Smith still to this day is one of the most marvelous and underappreciated performers of my generation. And so we did an extensive interview with the guys from Satchel, with Sean Smith, with Regan Hagar, and then eventually when I relocated to Seattle, I had the opportunity to see them a handful more times at the Tractor Club, and I mean, again, this is an amazing band formed out of, Regan Hagar was the drummer for Mother Love Bone. These are amazing, amazing musicians. Satchel, I highly recommend you go and look up. They had 2 amazing albums, EDC, and I think it was called The Family Plan, the second red one. This is a time also when the radio festivals were really big, where, they'd get bands to come on and do a shortened version of their set. And this is a summer when we saw everybody from No Doubt to RockLove favorites Dishwalla, who had just burst onto the scene a year before. I mean, look at some of the amazing talent that we're getting to witness here. Filter, I used to love Filter, and when they would play that amazing track of theirs, Hey Man, Nice Shot, and the guitar playing, and the guitar player would get down on his knees on the ground and lean his back and just start wailing on that guitar as the lead singer bolted out of his vocal caverns. Hey Man, Nice Shot. I mean, amazing stuff. Fillmore, San Francisco, Bill Graham's Fillmore, San Francisco, one of the most famous venues. RockLove Magazine covered hundreds and hundreds of shows there. I did several interviews there. I partied with bands off the fire escape just to the just off of stage left, and so one of the most interesting and fun and unique ones was seeing the Finn brothers, Tim and Neil Finn from Crowded House, coming together and doing a set with a smaller band, a lot of acoustic stuff, just a really special evening at that point. 1996, which was the second year of RockLove, was just a magical year. Again, we had just discovered bands like Dishwalla and Sublime and some of the bands that would become popular after the post-Nirvana era. Music totally changed after Nirvana. The grunge thing began to die down. A little bit more of poppiness and snappiness came into the songs of the era, and the times, they were a-changing. And friends, that'll do it for today's version of the RockLove Podcast. I'm Scott Hunter. Thank you so much for joining me to remember and reflect upon the greatness of the RockLove Magazine between 1995 and 2001. 6 fabulous years in my life. Also, thank you to Ed and Jean for joining us and talking about using Todd Rundgren's charitable foundation to help influence the lives of children with music and try to save music education. Can't think of a bigger and better and more important topic. So, friends, until I see you next time, I'm Scott. This is the RockLove Magazine Podcast. Have a great day.